Mark Thiessen is here. He's a Washington Post columnist and an American Enterprise Institute and a former presidential speechwriter who was in the Bush White House for a number of years. Mark, good to see you tonight.
Good to be with you, Megan.
You know, obviously we're focused on what is happening overseas, but again, with the fundraisers, as we may have 23, the early reports are 23 Americans were on the manifest. We're waiting for actual confirmations. But at a minimum, we have 300 people dead from what appears to be an act of terror.
Absolutely. I mean, you have almost 298 people, possibly Americans killed, and not in a plane crash, in a missile, surface-to-air missile attack against that plane. At the same time, in Israel, our closest ally in the Middle East is engaged in a ground war. And instead of heading to the Situation Room, the president's heading to a fundraiser. I mean, could he not have sent Joe Biden? Could he not have sent the First Lady? Do you think anybody would have returned their checks because the president went back to the White House to manage two international crises that are happening at the same time?
What is he doing? Why is he doing that?
I honestly don't know. I mean, and Ed pointed out, just last week, he was in Texas and went to a fundraiser instead of the border, and he's got a pattern of doing this. The day after the Benghazi attack, he was in Las Vegas for a fundraiser. The day after Putin initially invaded Ukraine and took over Crimea, he went to a fundraiser and said it's happy hour for the Democratic Party. When Iraq was falling in Mosul, the day Mosul fell to ISIS, he went to Laguna Beach for a fundraiser and then went for a vacation in Palm Springs. So I just don't understand what this president is thinking.
I mean, is it that he doesn't want to alarm people? He doesn't want to say the world is ending, so he wants to keep his tone measured, and he wants his day not to look disrupted. So, you know, we all do the same.
Well, you know, it's kind of hard when you're sitting there and you have virtually a split screen where you're making jokes about transportation funding and joking about Jack Lew's signature, as he did in his speech today. And then on the pictures of the screen are a smoke plume coming out of the ground in Ukraine where there could be dead Americans. You know, that's the kind of thing that disrupts a president's day. You're allowed to have your day disrupted. No one's going to think that you're not in command because you decided to go back to the Situation Room, to the White House, to monitor events rather than going to a fundraiser. So I don't think that's
It is not. You pointed out that he's done these fundraisers repeatedly when we've had, you know, serious situation, including, you know, confirmed American lives lost, i.e. Benghazi.
Yeah.
The other thing that people are looking at from our commander-in-chief on a night like this, Mark, when we're concerned. I mean, we're concerned. The world is in a lot of trouble right now, and it is not tranquil, Mr. Ernest.
Yeah.
Is some comfort. You know, he's also considered the comforter-in-chief, and you know that as a former presidential speechwriter. And so we heard those words today, and a lot of people said, really? And then you move on to transportation, and it reminds one of the remarks he made after the Fort Hood massacre, where, well, we have it queued up. Watch it.
Let me, first of all, just thank Ken and the entire Department of the Interior staff for organizing just an extraordinary conference. My understanding is that you had an extremely productive conference. Every single member of my team understands that this is a top priority for us, but as some of you might have heard, there has been a tragic shooting at the Fort Hood Army base in Texas.
He was excoriated for that, and now it seems he's done it again.
Well, yeah, if you look at the speech he gave today, he was joking around about Joe Biden. He went literally seamlessly out of those comments about that he said that, you know, we may have had a tragedy here, to making jokes about Joe Biden's looks, making jokes about Jack Lew's signature on your dollar bill, and then going into basically political attacks against Republicans, joking about being sued by Speaker Boehner.
Let me ask you this, because you were on the inner circle of a White House. What was it like under President Bush? I mean, was there an understanding that the American people are looking to their leader to set the tone? And again, maybe this is the tone he wants to set. You know, business as usual, nothing to see here. This is a little check mark that we need to address, but go forward. What was it like in that White House?
It wasn't anything like this. The President of the United States, if there was a terrorist attack, he would be in charge of it. I mean, if you look at 9/11 and the story of what happened on the day of 9/11, everybody was trying to keep the president out. He desperately wanted to get back to the White House.
I know, but he got ripped for continuing Read the Children's story, which is something a lot of Democrats ripped on him for. But now, you know, you would think that people would learn from that.
Absolutely, and so Democrats were ripping President Bush for spending 3 more minutes with the children before jumping out of the room. But President Obama can go to a fundraiser after Benghazi after this, and it's no problem. But if you read the accounts of that day, President Bush desperately he was insistent over the objections of everybody in his security detail. I'm going to be back in the White House tonight. I want the American people to see their commander-in-chief in the White House leading the country unafraid. And I think the Americans are not seeing that from this president. We need the commander-in-chief, whether you're Republican or Democrat. When something like this happens, particularly if Americans might be killed, you want the commander-in-chief in charge. You want him back at the White House doing his job and not raising money for the Democratic Party.
You have got Democratic Senator Carl Levin saying this could be considered an act of war. An act of war. You can see it there. Whoever did it should pay a full price. If it's by a country either directly or indirectly, then it could be considered an act of war. And if it's an act of war with dead Americans, then there's a real problem for not just those who are on board that aircraft and their families tonight, but the people of the United States. Mark, thank you.
Thanks, Megan.